Thank you so much. There were some great stories. It reminded me of some of my own personal experiences, but I'm not going to share those tonight. As my communications director is sitting there going, don't do it, don't do it. Just to kind of tell you about some of the issues that we've been working on, but also just to kind of give you some context about the fights that we have behind us, but also in front of us. This past week, we always take up a House resolution in the California Assembly to remember the anniversary of Roe v. Wade. And this year was no different. And of course, this year was also no different because we have some individuals that do represent and are elected in different parts of our state that are really anti-choice and just hateful when it comes to a lot of their positions when it comes to women's rights. And it really caused me to think about just this past year and some of the challenges we face, from the altered videos to the protests and even the most recent unspeakable acts of violence. And it just kind of makes me think about like the hatred that we see out there and the lies, of course, and the mistruths. And I wonder why that's their chosen weapon. But I realized that after 43 years of Roe v. Wade, that the answer is pretty simple. The opponents of choice have no other option but to lie and misrepresent, because I believe we have already won the debate on whether a woman has a fundamental right to control her own body. A woman's right is hers and hers only, period. And I think public opinion always supports that. And when we defeat that ballot initiative, we will once again reaffirm that position. So what do you do if you're the opposition and you're on the wrong side of history and wrong side of the truth? What do you do when your arguments fail to convince the American people? You attack the organizations that embody and protect that fundamental right. You attack the people who work for the organization, and you attack its leaders. This is what we have witnessed not only during the past several months, but during the past several years, if not decades. From the sting operations 10 years ago by a group calling themselves Live Action, who actually secretly recorded visits to Planned Parenthood centers and then edited videotapes to be released to the media, to protests earlier this summer at Planned Parenthood, just really close to us in Hollywood, in West Hollywood, and most recently, during last summer's congressional hearings where members pretty much acted like kids and made up facts on the spot, and even had graphs that backed up those false facts. So all this is just a part of the opposition strategy to attack, and lie. Last year I had a similar experience and saw firsthand the kind of disrespectful rhetoric that Planned Parenthood, NARAL, and just every single women's groups have to deal with. I have authored multiple pieces of Planned Parenthood legislation, and during one of the committee hearings this last year, this guy just comes up and everyone has a right to testify in front of our committee hearings, and he just comes up and just starts yelling, "Shame! Shameful, Mr. Gomez, shameful!" And I was just sitting there, standing up at the podium, similar to this, and just taking the verbal abuse. And if you're ever in that situation, you really do well up with a little bit of anger. Your flight response kind of kicks in. The names didn't really. He just said shame, but that kind of bothered me because there's nothing that I was ashamed about, and I was very proud of the legislation I introduced and actually passed through the California State Legislature. But I only had to stand there for 5 minutes until the sergeants came up and kicked the guy out. And and during that same summer, we saw Cecile Richards just sit there for hours after hours, just taking this verbal abuse from members of Congress that we should act better. So after watching that and after having my own experience, I can tell you for a fact that Cecile Richards is one of my new heroes. So it is easy for us in California to forget that we are part of a greater fight that you see across the country. Because at times we are the most progressive state in the nation, but California and Los Angeles in many ways remain ground zero in this fight. The mastermind behind the most recent video smear campaign was trained by one of the leaders of Live Action from 10 years ago. They actually come here to prove their worth to the anti-choice and anti-abortion movement. So it is important to have leadership in California and Los Angeles who understand this and who stand ready to be an ally and fight for justice. And that's exactly what I have done and the California Democrats have done and what I could plan to continue to do. What we have achieved, of course, has been because of a community of some of the most dedicated individuals that I've ever met, coming together, working together in lockstep towards a common goal. And all of you are on the front lines of this fight. You are the embodiment of our victories from your experiences and your stories, as well as your values. From the clinics to the political action, the victory for women's health has been led by all of you and the people that came before all of you. So the attacks by the opposition should be no surprise. The attacks will continue, but it is up to us in this room to determine their impact. Let's continue moving forward the same way we got here, with a concerted effort. And this is what I plan on doing. California leads the nation on these issues, and I commit to you to being a champion for women's health in Sacramento by authoring legislation to protect choice and expand access to health care for all. And one of the things that I tell some of my colleagues is that you can't be for choice and be against access to health care. You can't be for choice and be against Medi-Cal. You can't be for choice and be against social services. Because having a right without an ability to exercise it is almost meaningless.
Right.
So we have taken a long fight. This just last week, in consultation with Planned Parenthood, I introduced legislation to actually make the transmission of illegally obtained confidential conversations like they did in Planned Parenthood against the law of distributing across the internet. And this is a bill that is going to be difficult, but we're going to get it done, and I'm prepared to take on the verbal insults and the hits, because I know this one is definitely going to rile up the other side, but I'm looking forward to it. But what I ask of you is continue doing what you're doing, because you make us possible to pass this legislation by making your voices heard. You make us fight. You make it possible to fight for the resources, and you make it possible for millions of women and men in this state to receive the quality care they deserve, and I applaud you for it. But let us recommit to stand for that fundamental right of choice, and of course, most importantly, to stand for one another. Thank you so much.